Can I reconvene this meeting of the Education, Lifelong Learning and Culture Committee? And we now move to the third item on our agenda this morning, which is the first evidence-taking session as part of the committee's consideration of the Autism Scotland Bill. I'm pleased to be able to welcome our witnesses this morning. We've been joined by Robert Moffat, who is the National Officer with the National Autistic Society of Scotland, and by Alan Somerville, who's the Chief Executive of the Scottish Society for Autism.
I think it's vitally important that we go through a rigorous process of identification. Basically, there are expected to be 50,000 people with autism in Scotland. And when you take family members into account, it really means in reality it directly touches the lives of 200,000 people in our nation. Now, a great many of these people are unidentified and undiagnosed. Nevertheless, we know that they will be struggling with the condition. They will be failing to access employment. They will be failing to access appropriate housing. Failing to access leisure opportunities. They'll be facing social isolation. They'll be socially excluded. And this all has a really dramatic impact on people, such that many people actually, the difficulties they face lead to serious breakdown and usually some form of crisis intervention, usually through psychiatric services or mental health services.
There are a large number of people out there who are undiagnosed. We don't know where they are. I suspect the great majority of them are living in their parents' houses. We know a lot about autistic children and where they're educated. But after that, they're thrown out into the wide world.
So access to those mental health services can be quite difficult for families to access. They know that there's something that their child has an issue, a problem. They're concerned about them, but sometimes accessing the CAM service isn't quite easy or straightforward. And
because diagnosis will not only lead to this person being able to access mainstream services that already exist out there with a little bit of support, it will also help the person make sense of their life.
I mean, if you have a heart problem, for instance, once you're diagnosed, you get a letter saying turn up at the hospital and then the consultant will advise a course of treatment. You get a diagnosis of autism, you then have to hunt around yourself and find someone who's actually prepared to provide you services. And at the end of the day, I believe that any legislation has to take ownership of that individual for their whole life, because they are still going to be autistic at the end of whatever service you provide for them.
Well, you know, where do we start? There are so many, but, you know, to begin with, 13% of adults with autism are in full-time employment. You know, this is despite the fact that the vast majority of these adults are actually capable of taking on meaningful employment and making a contribution not only to society, but, you know, also to the public purse. The people that we work with report to us all the time that they are still facing incredible barriers to support. They're facing social isolation. They are basically prisoners in their own home. The world is still a terrifying place for them that they do not understand. I think that last point you made is crucial. If this approach through legislation were to fail, we believe that we would be left back where we were 10 years ago. We would be left with an approach that does not have legislative backing and depends on recommendations and somehow a will to actually get things done. It's going to knock us back 10 years. I don't want to be sitting here in another 10 years saying, we tried that then, and once again, it simply didn't work. I don't want to be sitting here in 10 years' time, having spent another £23 billion on autism, to find that the people that we support are still coming back to us and saying, I am not supported, I cannot access services, I cannot get a job, I cannot go into my local leisure centre, I am a prisoner in my own home. I don't want to be doing that in another 10 years. As I keep going on about it, joined up thinking, joined up working, getting local authorities, health boards to work in concert, the whole of society basically to work in concert to actually support this. So resources, I think, I mean, it is very, very important. We all know that, the issue of resources. But I personally feel that the issue of resources is something that's been overhyped, if you like. Because really, when you talk to people with autism, they're not, you know, they're not blind, they're not misguided, they're intelligent people. They know we're in the middle of a financial crisis. They are not asking for, swathes of money to be thrown their way. They are not asking for special treatment. They know the situation we're in. What they are actually asking for is there are services out there that already exist. There are mainstream services out there that already exist, and we simply cannot access them because people do not understand autism. They do not understand the types of difficulty that we have. And with small modifications, these mainstream services can actually be tailored to meet our needs.